Welcome to the Starlight Pet Talk podcast, where we'll talk about and explore ways to help pet parents and future pet parents learn everything they need to know to have a happy and healthy relationship with their pet. So sit up and stay for Starlight Pet Talk, rescue, adoption, and pet parenting done right.
If you're a fan of Starlight Pet Talk, you'll love our new line of merchandise. We have t-shirts, hoodies, and more, all featuring your favorite podcast logos and designs. Plus, we're offering a limited number of Starlight Outreaching Rescue items where a portion of the proceeds go directly to animal rescue. Our merchandise is the perfect way to show your support for your favorite pet podcast and animal rescue at the same time. So what are you waiting for? Just visit our website at www.starlightpettalk.com to order your merchandise today. Welcome to Starlight Pet Talk. I'm your host, Amy Castro, and I am actually recording this podcast episode from beautiful Cape Cod, taking a little vacation, which was much needed. And unfortunately, it's a little bit of a rainy day today, so my best friend, Bev, who is lucky enough to live here, and I decided we were going to record this podcast episode that I've been wanting to share with you all for a while, since I had Bev on the very first episode of the podcast, the Welcome to Starlight Pet Talk, and she dished the dirt on me and my background. And this is the 21st episode. So we've been rocking and rolling for a while now, but I wanted to have Bev on to talk about her experience with her cat named Cuzzy. And you can probably explain why his name is Cuzzy, because it's a little bit weird, but don't save that story. So anyway, we are both very strong believers that a pet is for life. And unless there is some horrendously extenuating circumstance where you can no longer properly care for your pet, that no matter who your pet is, you need to make it work. And so Bev's story with Cuzzy is a prime example of somebody who was willing to kind of, in my opinion, go above and beyond in making that relationship work for the betterment of the cat, for sure. So, Bev, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Miss Amy.
All right. Well, glad to have you back. So I'd love for people to hear the story of how you got Cuzzy, because it's not your standard, I went to a shelter or a cat walked up to my door kind of story. So how did you get this crazy cat?
It's unusual because he kind of fell into my lap. I was working an evening shift at the Clarkstown Police Department.
Go Clarkstown.
I'm a dispatcher there. Was a dispatcher, recently retired, and got a call from the local highway department. And they had said that they got their hands on a cat that had been astray in the yard for quite some time. Would the animal control officer be able to come and take him? And of course, it was a holiday weekend. And of course, it was, I was working until 11 o'clock at night. There was no one available. But the gentleman who called me said he'd be willing to hang on to the cat until the next day, because I expressed a little bit of interest. My previous cat had passed away, and I was kind of feeling I might be getting a new cat soon. So he kept the cat overnight, and we agreed to meet at an exit ramp off a highway. How dicey is that?
The cat handoff.
Handoff on the highway, but it was totally fine. The guy was great. He worked for the highway department. I had his name and number and everything. And he kept saying, "Oh, she's so sweet, and she's this, that, and the other thing." I took one look into the cat carrier, and this massive head popped out. Like, it was definitely a male cat. He was just big and beefy, right? So even if it didn't work out for me, I knew that I had other options, whether it was another friend who could adopt him or go to the shelter, like if I couldn't handle him. Well, here it is. What did we say? 12 years later?
Something like that. It's been at least 12 years.
He has been such a joy to have. A challenge most of the time, but quite the joy. He makes me laugh every day, and it was definitely worth all the effort that I've been putting into him leading up to this podcast.
Yeah. Okay, so I know one of the things that was unusual about Cuzzy, and we'll try to lure him over and get him on, for those who are watching on video, to get him on the video, because he's quite the striking and giant beast. I'm always shocked at how much you say he weighs, like 15 pounds?
13.
Not even 15 pounds, 13 pounds. But looking at him, I would say he's 18 pounds, just because he seems like he's the size of a dog. And there goes his ears. Don't knock down the microphone. He's quite the striking and large kitty cat. So you were pretty surprised to figure out that despite the fact that he was found out as a stray, that he was declawed in the front.
Yeah. So when I initially got him, the animal control officer at the police department, Pat McCoy, how you doing? We scanned him for a chip the way you're supposed to, and we put stuff on Facebook, and I kept praying that nobody would claim him because he was awesome. What'd you ask me?
That you were surprised that he was declawed,
Oh.
being such a big beast and being outside,
Right.
seemingly for a while.
Yeah, so he either escaped from home or he was kicked to the curb because I discovered, such a handful. He was constantly getting into things. So, I mean, when people meet him for the first time, I have to say, I didn't declaw him. He came that way. I didn't order it. He just came that way. He was defunct when I got him.
Yeah, but it is interesting. So obviously whoever had him initially, even I don't believe in declawing either, but most people who do that fully intend to keep the cat indoors forever, and they think it doesn't need its claws because it's never going to go outside. And it's pretty obvious when you start hearing about Cuzzy's story and how he is that, I mean, odds are definitely in favor that somebody was like, this cat is just way too much. He's got to go. And so out he went. I know I'm shaming you. You're facing the sofa, not looking at us. Okay, so when did you realize that Cuzzy was not your average cat? Not you're just kind of like lay around in the sun, you feed him, scoop the litter box, and you're done.
Right, exactly. Working different shifts, I wasn't always guaranteed to be home in the morning. I wasn't always guaranteed to be home in the evening. So I set up these automatic timers that I got online, and they, have meals set up, and it goes off whatever times that you set. Well, previous cats that I had, you can leave a bowl out all day long and they come and they snack and they leave stuff behind and whatever. No, not only did he eat all of the week's worth of food, he opened up the clicking, locking lid to the feeder and ate the whole week's worth of food.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, all right, I guess I can't leave a bowl of food out. I didn't know what to do. So I bolted them shut. I drilled holes in the side of the feeder.
Yeah, so these are the big plastic automatic feeders. You'd think that when I'm looking at it across the room right now, and we can show a picture later on of what it looks like, but how he even got into that? Like he was determined to get into that cat feeder. It's crazy.
Incessant. Yeah, and he's creepy strong too. So I drilled a hole in the side of it and I put a nut and a bolt. Problem solved. This one comes to visit.
Meaning me.
Yeah. She decides, let's see if he can work the bolt. So she's encouraging him to turn the nut on the bolt to open it up just to see, because he's so smart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he was definitely following my lead. I don't think he ever really got the bolt all the way off.
No, but he's
definitely pawing at it and like, she's got something there. Yeah. So that was your first clue then that that Cuzzy was very determined to get fed. And it's interesting because he's not a heavy cat, but he probably would, you think he'd eat until he make himself sick?
I think he would, eat until he died, yeah.
Okay. Totally. So what are some of the other things? Let's focus on food right now. What are some of the other things that he did that were food related? And
so also in the same house in New York, the typical pantry in a house, and it had 2 louvered doors that were rattly. He learned how to bounce on the door because it was like a spring magnet type of thing.
Yeah.
Bounce on the door enough to open it up, and there was the food. Like he would get that. So then I had to lock that up. So now I have an eye and hook latch on the pantry, a nut and bolt on the feeder. I mean, it never stopped. Making dinner, raw chicken cutlets on the kitchen counter, and he's stretching himself up on top of the counter like, yeah, I want some of that. It just never stopped ever. So I knew he was highly food motivated, which helped me later on with teaching him how to behave like a gentleman.
Yeah. So it's basically you had to kind of go through almost baby-proofing the house, but cat-proofing the house to keep him away from anything related to food.
Right. Having other cats that behave themselves, he was the one who showed me the way in order to baby-proof the house. I had no idea that he could open up a door. I had no idea that he could open up the feeder, and it needed to be bolted shut. So it was kind of a learning process to find ways to make him safe, because if he got into that food and ate everything, it would be over.
Yeah, you could get obviously really sick. So somebody listening to this so far might say, okay, big deal. So you put a latch on the cabinet, you don't leave abandoned chicken cutlets on the kitchen counter. It's like, is that really that inconvenient? But I think people need to understand how far you've had to go related to the food. Like, talk about when you're preparing your meals.
So you fix your meal, you want to eat a hot meal after you've cooked it. When I visit her at her house, she has, P.S., animals everywhere, right? And I incessantly will say, you leave that on the counter? Like, how can you do that? Like, isn't anybody going to try to get that? And no, nobody goes up on the counter.
Nobody goes up on the stove and drags off a frying pan.
The minute I turn my back on a plate, on a dish that's still hot, anything, the minute I turn my back, he is on top of the counter, sneaking, very stealthily quiet to get up on the counter and eat. So when I'm done cooking and I want to sit down and have my own hot meal, I have to put all the dirty dishes that I've used, like a pot or a pan, like into the oven, into the microwave to hide it away from him. So I can sit
so you
down
can
and
eat
have a
all
hot
your
meal.
food still.
Well, yeah. Otherwise, I'd have to clean the kitchen before I could sit down and have a meal. That sucks.
So what have you tried? Because people will say, okay, well, there's products out there you can use for that. What kind of products have you tried to deter him from getting on the counters?
So this is a aerosol.
Oh, yeah, you scared me.
Scared him too.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, baby. So this is, it has a mechanism that sits on top, which I believe is broken at this point. Sits on top. It's motion censored.
Yeah, so it's basically a motion censored aerosol can that when the cat crosses the path, it blasts this. It's just air. It's not hurting anybody,
Yeah.
but the sound, as you
And
just
saw
heard,
what happened. He's gone.
yeah, for those who were watching on video, the cat just went flying. If you didn't, you might need to go to YouTube and check that out because it was pretty effective.
The idea of this, as well as another idea that we'll talk about in a second. The idea of this actually came from a television show called My Cat from Hell, which
With our friend Jackson Galaxy.
Jackson Galaxy, he's got it. Because if you chase your cat with a water bottle off the counter, he is like, "Why are you squirting me with the water bottle? I surf the kitchen counters all the time. Why now?"
Mm-hmm.
But if the kitchen counter is the one calling him out, and the kitchen counter is the one that's scaring him half to death, it's not me. It's the kitchen counter, and he won't go up on it any longer.
Yeah, and that's something important for people who do use, and I do use spray bottles in certain instances for things, but mostly for dogs because they know. I mean, they see me, they're looking at me spraying them, and whether you agree with that or disagree with that, it is effective for me. But with cats, once they start believe you're chasing them, then it's a constant game of chase. That's why when we talk to people about adopting kittens with little kids, it's like not always a great fit because once that kitten realizes that people are going to chase it all over the house, and because kids can't control themselves, and when they want to hold the kitty, they want to hold the kitty. Now you've got a cat that never comes out from under the bed, and you've kind of created that situation. So, you generally don't want your pet to associate you with something uncomfortable, because then when you really need to get a hold of them, they're running from you.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
Okay, so you tried the spray thing.
It worked. It still works if I had the device. I'm the one who got lazy, not him. He will always try to outsmart me.
Yeah.
And humans, we can get lazy.
So what other mischief, which is, when we talk about, and we've talked about this in a couple of previous episodes about quote unquote bad behavior in pets. Cuzzy's just being Cuzzy. This is him. He's a jungle cat in a domestic cat's body, and he's got things to do. It's, he's hunting, he's exploring, he's getting his exercise, he's, practicing being predator, practicing, avoiding being prey, things like that. But sometimes we as people don't understand that behavior. So what are some of the other challenges that you've had with him behavior wise?
So also working shift work. Sometimes you have to sleep a little bit later in the morning, and that doesn't work for his feeding schedule. So at the previous house where I lived in New York, instead of having doorknobs, it had door handles.
Like little levers?
Little levers. So actually, when I first got him, at one point, I thought my house was burglarized when I got home because all of my doors that had been closed were open. Because it's very easy for any kind of pet, a dog or a cat, to open up. All you got to do is pull down.
Reach up and paw down on the handle, yeah.
So he would do that to my bedroom door because he wants to be with me because I'm awesome. And so I had to, how do I keep him away from the bedroom door? Oh, I forgot. At one point, oh my gosh. At one point, my bedroom door is across the hallway from the guest room bedroom door. I actually tied a rope between the two handles. So if he opened up my bedroom door, he couldn't push open the door and wake me up. I forgot about that.
That's pretty clever.
However,
although don't do that if you have small children because it will clothesline them.
The beauty of living alone.
Yeah.
So this, if you're watching on video, looks like a plastic doormat.
Yeah, it's just a sheet of plastic that's got some electrical wires running through the center of it and a battery pack,
and
right?
A battery pack. It's what's a square one? A 9-volt battery.
Yeah.
And a wire running through it. So you place this on the floor in front of your door, and all it takes is one little step, and he gets a little shock. And I've touched it myself. It's more startling than it hurts. It's not a big deal. He did it once, and that was it. He never did it again. I haven't had a battery in this mat for several years, and he still manages to step over it. If I open the door and leave it, and he can come in and out as he pleases.
But he definitely avoids stepping.
He will never step on it.
Yeah, and I think it is important for people who are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you shock your cat. A couple of things. Number one, we call things like shock collars, and I'm not a believer in shock collars, but shock collars, shock mats, things like that. It's not like an electric shock. You feel a vibration, but because animals are so sensitive, it startles them. It's not something they're expecting, and it's not super pleasant. And so therefore I just learned quickly not to do it again.
Right. I think it's more startling than anything. And like you said, I'm just going to avoid it. And he stepped on it once, and it was the first, last, and only time he ever stepped on it.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where you do it as a last resort. You obviously tried several other things.
I did, right.
You know, we had a dog one time that used to dig out of the yard, and we tried all the regular tricks. I mean, we tried running fence underneath that chicken wire underneath that he couldn't dig through. That didn't work because it was a large yard. We tried filling the holes with dog poop because they said, oh, your dog's not going to want to dig in his own poop, but he didn't care. Or he would just dig a hole right next to it, filling it with rocks, filling it with broken bricks. I mean, nothing worked until we finally got 2 D batteries and this little electric wire. And again, actually, I don't even think he touched it. He was too smart to touch it. But the other dog touched it, and jumped, and then nobody touched the fence. And there never were any batteries in it after that, but we never had a problem.
And that's it.
And, if you've got a better solution, please let us know, because until when I feel like I've exhausted everything else, that was the best solution that worked. And again, the alternative of doing that versus getting rid of your pet because you can't keep them in your yard.
Exactly. I was completely willing to try. And this shock mat was very similar to the kitchen counter, the motion sensor aerosol spray, in that it wasn't me giving him the shock. It was the area in front of the door.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he learned that he can't put his paws on the door or open the latch, but he can use his voice.
Ah.
It's charming.
So now what does he do?
Let's see. Summertime. It starts getting light around 4:35. It goes on incessantly until I get up out of bed. Yeah, it's charming.
Yeah, and in those kinds of situations, I think it's just how persistent are you? How persistent is the pet? And it's really a test. Like, I know for my cats, they've done the same thing where they're meowing outside the door, and if I ignore them, within X amount of minutes, probably sometimes 30, because sometimes they're persistent, but sometimes, and this is just a good note for everybody, when you get up and open the door, even to yell at them to get away from your door, you're rewarding them because you're giving them attention. Yeah. So you have to, put in some earplugs or something like that until they realize that no amount of meowing is going to keep you, or is going to make you open the door. And then one would hope that he would give up. And so,
and that just jogged my memory, which is why I constantly run a fan spring, summer, winter, and fall in my room, like a big box fan. So it's white noise. Mm-hmm. So I don't have to hear him.
Yeah.
I forgot that.
Yeah. So we're probably about maybe halfway or so into this episode. And I know that there are people listening that are saying, you are freaking crazy, that nobody should go to that extent for an animal. Aww. Why don't you just lock him in the bathroom? I've even said that, like he's got a lot of his stuff is downstairs in her basement. It's not like a scary, creepy basement. Why not just close him down there? And that is an option. Some animals do have their space. That's where they go at night. So you can live your life and be peaceful, but it's a choice. It's a choice that you have as the human that's in charge. So why do you put up with him?
Well, like people say, it's a part of their family. Mm-hmm. You invest a lot of your heart into it and everything. And when you take on that responsibility, like you said in the beginning, this is a responsibility that's going to last about 20 years. And you can't just kick somebody to the curb because they're pissing you off. Yeah. You just can't do that. Find another way. Go onto a podcast or a website, find another solution. Watch Jackson Galaxy on TV. I never thought of that, which is why I have the shock mat and the motion sensor. These things worked over time, and yes, it's a struggle, but it makes me laugh every day, and it's the investment of your blood, sweat, and tears into this.
Yeah. Well, no pet, no companion, no person is perfect, and you have to make adaptations to make the relationship work for sure. Do you find, and this is something else I think, when people, I'm thinking right now about Eddie, the dog that I have at my house right now, who chewed some very expensive chairs. 100% my fault. I left him unattended, a dog that I did not know very well, who was young and obviously had a thing for chewing. I just didn't know the extent that he would be willing to chew on, just enough to basically ruin not destroy. You could sit in it if you want to see the foam sticking out of your chair. One chair, and then moved across the room and did the same thing to the other chair. It's like every animal's different. Some animal might have worked on that chair and just worked a little corner and then walked away. Some animals might have taken that chair down to the springs and the feet and gone from there. So you've really, I think, supervision and understanding how your animal operates and how far they're willing to go. How much of a chew drive does that animal have? How much of a food drive does your animal have? Because I can't imagine, and I've had lots of cats, whether it's my personal cats or just cats coming through my house, and they all love food, but I've never seen anything like that. The extent to which your cat would go to rip into a bag of potato chips, or throwing the garbage can down the stairs because it had a latch top. I mean, how does a cat maneuver? I mean, you'd have to envision this home that's got a kind of an open concept, and the cat managed to get the garbage can from the kitchen about 8 feet away to the top of the stairs and pushed it down.
It opened.
And it opened. Look at how well that worked. I mean, no, that would not happen at my house. They would sit there, they would cry for 2 minutes, and they would just move on.
Yeah.
So some animals are much more persistent in what they need. My point in that, too, is to bring up the fact that, some of these behaviors, beyond some of the interventions that you've taken so far to curb them, can also be prevented by making sure that your animal has appropriate, not only exercise, which, we always talk about tiring animals out so that they're, less mischievous, but enrichment. And nowadays we're really talking more about enrichment, and exercise is definitely a piece of that. So I know you spend a significant amount of time, again, beyond what people would think for a cat. Now, a lot of the things that Bev does with the cat, I think people do with their dogs, or they at least try to do with their dogs. But I don't think people realize that, there are some cats who would really benefit greatly, whether it's behavior that's unwanted or even anxiety. You've got a cat that just constantly licks themselves or is bullying another cat. Maybe they need more enrichment. So how did you kind of start going down I've done this, I've done the preventative measures. What can I do also to just help his overall well-being and his need to just be such a darn busybody?
First, I started with the fact that it does break my heart to have an indoor cat, and I get it. Every cat is safer in the home. Don't let your cats out to run free. Cars up here, it's coyotes. It's just horrible.
People shoot them.
Yeah. So I think you even suggested try the harness and leash. I'm like, that's never going to work. Sure enough, it freaking works, and it works terrific. We go out, and I always say to people, hey, I'm the crazy cat lady that walks my cat on a harness and leash. But he thinks he's a freaking puma. Yep. I mean, it's unbelievable. The stalking alone, it burns up so much energy. It's exhausting.
It's mental energy too.
Exactly.
You may see a cat sitting there very, very tense and leaning down, ears forward, or the butt starts to wiggle, but there's so much thinking and processing that's going on. And it's the same thing with dogs. You give a dog a good, and we'll get into puzzle toys and things like that, but they can get exhausted from working a puzzle toy. Yeah, if you're watching the video, you're getting to see Cuzzy.
Aww.
If you're not watching the video, we'll put his picture up. Yeah, the dogs and animals need to use their brains just like we do. Otherwise, they either go down the wrong path, get into mischief, or rot. So So walking him on a leash.
That's part of it. And I just want people to know, like, if you're playing with your cat in your house with a feather toy or something like that, and they seem not to be interested or disengaged, leave it still for a second. Let them engage. You can see it. You can see when they get engaged. It might be boring for you. That's my point. You have to be a little bit patient until they get engaged and they want to put it into first gear and start going. It does seem a little boring at times, but like I said, that stalking is huge. Stalking and figuring out prey or whatever.
So what kind of things, let's say you're not going outside and you're not able to get him out on the leash, or you don't feel like it, what other things are you doing to keep him engaged and burning off mental and physical steam?
You really do need to get creative. Even if you just search on Amazon, there's always some kind of toy that you might know works specifically for your cat. For my cat, he needs to run until he's panting, but that can't always happen, especially when you're indoors in New England. So you kind of have to get creative. And what I've done, he's very food motivated, so I'll take a handful of his treats, and one by one, I throw them to the top of the stairs, and they bing, 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 and they bounce down the stairs, and he runs up and down these very high, I'm sure you remember, Very
Yes,
tall
very
stairs.
steep, scary stairs.
So it's good for his cardio, and he's constantly balancing. He has slipped a little bit occasionally, but it's really good just running up and down the stairs until he's like, I'm done. We're okay. And he's no longer a jerk. He's no longer pushing things off the edge of the table. If a cat does that, in my eyes, it means you're not doing something for them. So doing something that just burns up energy. What I've done in the past, the puzzle treat, or the treat puzzle, whatever you want to call it, that's always good for their brain. And
I just recently gotten those for our dogs too, just to, number one, it's something for them to do, kind of keeps their minds occupied. And there's a lot of research that backs up the nose work that they have to do, and the figuring out how to make that puzzle work burns just as much energy as a run does, because they're using it's just a different type of energy, but it's just as exhausting for them and so important. And I think it's interesting that we don't give our animals the same credit that we give children. Like, we wouldn't keep your on a rainy day when you've got kids trapped in the house, you're going to find something for them to do. If you're not trapped in the house, you're going to be getting them outside, getting them running. You've got sign them up for soccer. You sign them up for this. Well, because they need to burn off steam, and they need to use their physical bodies, and they need to use their minds. And our animals have those same needs. And like you said, when we don't fulfill those, they get into all kind of mischief because they're creating their own opportunities, just like a kid trapped in the house with nothing to do is going to do.
And sometimes you might think that it's kind of boring. Like, you get we talked about Jackson Galaxy's The Bird earlier. And sometimes he's not chasing it. Well, drag it across the floor like it's prey. Even though he's not jumping on it and chasing it, that stalking is mentally exhausting. So you have to get into their world. You can't just, you just have to make sure that you fulfill all the slices of the pie for them, whether it's running or stalking or whatever it might be. But the other one I think we mentioned earlier in the podcast was the One Fast Cat, the big hamster wheel.
I don't know. So for those of you who may be watching this on video, I was going to say this and then I forgot, is that we had some technical difficulties recording this episode. So we actually recorded the first half of this episode probably like 2 weeks ago when we were in person together, and now we're recording it remotely to catch up. So it's a little bit of a Did we talk about that already? But I don't think we got into the Fast Cat because we had big plans. We were going to show it and all that other stuff. But talk about that, because it's like a giant hamster wheel, right?
That's all it
pretty
is.
much.
It's completely safe. The framework, there's really no framework. It sits on a cradle, and the wheel sits on 4 smaller wheels. So there's no framework that they're going to get caught in or anything. And it comes unassembled, and you kind of click the pieces together, and it makes this giant, 4-foot tall wheel.
Yeah, it's big.
It's big, and it spins very easily on the 4 smaller wheels, casters like on the bottom.
Yeah.
And my cat has to be food motivated, so a piece of chicken will do it. A piece of cat food would not do it. So I have to get a piece of chicken that's cooked and hold that in front of him to get him going and running. And then after a few minutes, he'll last a while, but after a few minutes, he's like, yeah, no, we're done. Give me the chicken or I'm getting off this thing. But having said that, it still encourages balance, encourages hunting, encourages running. He gets a little bit of a workout, and was definitely worth the purchase to get it. I think other people might have better success if their cat also is food motivated as well. But it works. I think it's great. In the wintertime, it's perfect.
Yeah. So I think the bottom line with a lot of this is, number one, you need to get to know your pet. How much of a need do they have for extra exercise and extra stimulation? And then what do they like to do? What really floats their boat? And I think part of that probably has to do with not only the pet itself, its personality. It could be, tied back to its breed, because most of us don't have a clue what our pets really are from a breed perspective. But do you feel like, too, it also has to do with his physical age and development? I know you got him as an adult. You didn't get him as a kitten.
Right.
But has his need for that changed, or what he likes to do, has that changed over time?
It has, but very little.
Okay.
He's definitely less playful, but he still likes to go out on the harness and leash. He'll still do the One Fast Cat wheel. Maybe not so much the bird anymore, but his tastes really haven't changed. He's just slowing down a little bit. That's all.
Yeah. That happens to all of us when we get older. And it's interesting. We did a recent episode with a person who is a very experienced, not only shelter person, but also a trainer. And we were just kind of planning for the episode and talking about what we're going to talk about on the episode. And I had never really thought about the fact that the toy need does not go away just because the dog's not a puppy anymore. It may just be a different toy or a different kind of play that we need to engage our pets in as they get older.
Yeah, the bird, usually when he was younger, that would be the one that he would just go crazy for to the point where he was panting. Now his big thing is those kick sticks. So it's like that fiber-filled, cloth-covered, pretty stiff toy. That's
Kong makes some really good ones of those. Kickaroos or whatever they're called. Yep. We'll put it in the links. So they can do that rabbit kick, and that seems to be his go-to thing, along with totally getting high with the catnip. Tell people what you do with your catnip outside, or at least you did at the old house. I'm not sure about the new house.
Yeah, it's same thing. So it's right now in July, it's out there in the pot growing, and once in a while, kind of like basil, you can pinch it back and take a few leaves off, and I just put it in the freezer in a baggie. And first time the frost comes, then I take the rest of it and put everything in the freezer. So all winter long we have fresh, not dried, fresh frozen catnip, and he just goes crazy for it. Even if it comes out like wilted and whatever, he don't care. He loves it.
It's funny, Kelsey pulled out a baggie out of the freezer. You never know what you're going to find in our freezer, but pulled a baggie out of the freezer there the other day, and is like, okay, I need you to tell me, is this parsley, cilantro, or catnip? And I'm like, I don't know. It looks like green goo at this point, but the cat knows. The cat knows the difference for sure. What do you do with that wet catnip?
Just kind of give it to him, even if it's slimy at that point, you can just rub it on one of the toys, like the kick stick. And goes crazy for it, and
kind of gets the smell on it again.
It's fine. If it's a nice big whole leaf, then he'll just eat that. He doesn't care if it's icy cold or whatever. He just eats it. He's a monster. He's terrible.
Yeah. One other question. Obviously, there's a wide range of budgets. I know things like the One Fast Cat are not inexpensive. Even the bird is not, a cheap cat toy per se. Have you found that random household objects or homemade toys? Because I've seen some of the weird stuff on your floor that it's like, is that garbage or is the cat playing with that?
God bless Chewy and Amazon, because that's how you get, the cat just loves to get inside a box. Everybody knows you put a cardboard box on the floor, boom, they're in. So every time there's an Amazon shipment or whatever, he's in the box. But crumbled up pieces of paper, that's the best. Always, or
the crinkly paper that comes in some of those boxes. Cats love that too.
Or you take the crinkly paper and you make a tent out of it so they can get into that. I mean, if I could turn the camera around, my dining room floor is just a mess. It's a cat fest.
Littered with cat debris.
But P.S., I don't have, kids living at home. I live by myself, so what do I care? It's a mess.
So do you feel like you have to kind of cycle the toys through, or, take some away and then bring them back to keep them interesting, or you just leave everything out?
Yeah. No, I think so. And also I get tired of looking at it. But especially things like newspaper and whatnot, eventually they lose their crinkliness. So when there's a fresh batch of Amazon whatever coming in, then I just switch it out. And mostly just because I get tired of looking at the floor being a mess. So I switch the toys out and I go into the closet and I say, oh, he hasn't played with this for a while. Let's switch it out. And I guess there is a little bit of interest to try to keep it fresh, but it always comes back to the cardboard boxes. It really does.
Yeah.
And there's one or two favorite toys that are they're always his go-to thing. One of them is like a little tiny yarn ball, like those little chicks that you used to make as a kid. Like you wrap the ball up and you cut the ends and it just makes
it's just like... Yeah, it's just like a pom-pom, basically.
A pom-pom. And they're silent. Yeah. You'd think it would have to be something crinkly or whatever, but it's silent, but it moves quickly and it bounces around. That seems to make him crazy.
Yeah, I think certain noises and then the motion, you're engaging the different senses. So whether it's something that smells a certain way, something that feels a certain way, sounds a certain way, look for those opportunities to kind of get those different things into your repertoire of toys and things to do with your pet.
And I just thought of one other thing was changing the sheets on the bed. Always fun. Always fun.
Gosh.
I know.
I've never had a cat that does that.
Really?
No.
I think part of it is, hunting under I can't see what it is, you got to pounce on it. And also, they are so fastidious that having a clean sheet is just heaven to them.
I like that.
So I try to clean the cat beds as frequently as possible because they like clean stuff and so does everybody else. So just wash it as much as you can.
There you go. There you go. So overall, it sounds like you have gone above and beyond what, because I get people calling. I mean, I literally had a lady call the other day, and granted, it was an issue between her cat and the new cat. She had not had the cat 24 hours and she was already ready to return it. And because the place that she got it from wasn't open, she was just calling rescues. And it's like, okay, the cat hadn't really done anything yet other than, her and the new cat weren't getting along. Well, they don't even know each other,
Yeah.
And so just to kind of wrap things up, what lessons could you share with people or maybe give them some motivation for sticking with it when they've got a quote unquote difficult pet like Cuzzy might be perceived by some people to be?
Well, when you take on that responsibility, it's a commitment. And I don't want to equate it with a baby that you can't send back, but I mean, it's a commitment. You made the commitment, you wanted to adopt, so follow through. Be consistent. Put the time into it. Give them time to adjust. If you bring a kitten home and it's not getting along with your cat that's there now, give them some time. Figure it out. Research before
Research is huge. I know you've done a lot of research.
Yeah. A lot of it was just figuring out like the door handles. I had in the other house, they were latches and all the doors were open. If I really had a problem with that, I would probably switch the door handles out to doorknobs. A lot of it was just trial and error. Oh, he's thrown the garbage can down the stairs because he was trying to get the bungee cord off the top of it.
Yeah.
If your child misbehaves, you don't throw it away. You figure out a way to make it work. That's all it is. It's just commitment and empathy. Make the house livable for the cat, not just yourself. There's a way around it.
I think sometimes too, changing your mindset. I know that I personally have had my eyes opened and my mind opened a little bit just in doing this podcast and talking to different pet experts, especially with cats. It's like, it's not bad behavior, it's cat behavior. That's what cats do.
Perfect.
And so I think, if you don't know what cats do and you don't know what cats need going into it, and you think it's just going to be this thing that's going to lay around your house and maybe occasionally cuddle with you and have no other needs whatsoever, you're not giving the animal credit enough for who it is, from a species standpoint. Exactly. So it's important to do your homework even from that perspective before you decide, oh, I can't get a dog because I don't have this in lifestyle, or I work too many hours, so I'll just get a cat. And it's like, well, that cat may be just as much of a challenge as you have found as any dog. So be prepared for that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And he's worth it. He makes me laugh every day. There's something that he does every day. I have company visiting, and he is working her. He is trying to get treats from her. Last night we were eating dinner, and he's practically reaching up and grabbing her bowl to pull it down, the bowl that we were eating out of. I'm like, you got to tell him no. You got to tell him no, because it's going to happen. But it's definitely worth all the effort. He's worth it.
He is something else. We'll post his picture on the show notes. Well, Bev, I appreciate you jumping back on and redoing this whole 20 minutes of the last half of this podcast with me. It was such a bummer, too, because we were on such a good flow. So hopefully we finished it up well. I think we did okay.
Yeah, I hope so.
But we're definitely going to have you back as a recurring guest, because I ordered you, just so everybody knows, I ordered Bev her own headset for podcasting, so therefore she can be high tech and professional. And I'm just going to let her take over the podcast. I'm not going to do it anymore.
No. It's bad enough that I'm going back to headphones after working at the police department with headphones. Oy.
Hey, there you go. It'll be just like that. We'll pretend.
I'll be having a flashback.
All right. Well, I'll let you get back to visiting with your auntie there. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you all for listening to another episode of Starlight Pet Talk. And as I always say, if you don't do anything else this week, give your pets a hug from us, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Starlight Pet Talk podcast. We're glad you joined us to gain new insight on the many loving ways to adopt and care for your pets. Be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. And if you want more information, go to starlightpettalk.com, because your pet can't talk. Be sure to join us next time for Starlight Pet Talk.